The sizzle of onions in the pan masked the silence in the room. I was stirring mindlessly, lost in thought, when my stepson stepped into the kitchen, his voice softer than usual. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said, not meeting my eyes. I smiled, assuming it was about school or girls. But when he finally spoke, the words he chose knocked the breath from my chest. It was not playful curiosity. It was raw, aching, and far too intimate. I stared at him, spatula in hand, heart racing. I should have said no, but I simply could not. It was a Wednesday evening, the kind that settles in slowly, blanketing the house with a strange sort of calm. Outside, the wind nudged the trees, rustling their tired leaves, while inside, I stood at the stove, stirring a simmering pot of tomato and basil pasta. The soft clatter of utensils and the bubbling sauce gave the room a warmth I had not felt in a long time. Ever since my divorce, I had tried to rebuild a routine, and the kitchen had become my place of quiet. Familiar, manageable, and controlled. But that night, as the scent of garlic filled the air, something shifted. Ryan entered the room just as I was reaching for the olive oil. He moved with his usual quiet presence, gentle but noticeable. At 24, my stepson had grown into a tall, broad-shouldered man with a calmness in his demeanor that made him seem older than he never pried into my pain, and I never questioned his choice. We simply existed around each other in a house too big for one, yet just comfortable enough for two. "You always cook when you're upset," he said, leaning casually against the counter. His eyes were sharp but kind, watching me with a gaze that made my fingers slow their work. I gave a small laugh. "I suppose I do. It keeps my hands busy." Ryan nodded thoughtfully and stepped closer. I noticed the faint scent of cedarwood cologne on him, subtle but present. He reached into the drawer for a fork, testing the pasta with ease, like he belonged in this rhythm. And truthfully, he did. Over time, we had formed a strange but comforting domestic partnership. He took out the trash, fixed what needed fixing, and helped with groceries without being asked. In return, I cooked, cleaned, and kept the home warm, not just in temperature, but in spirit. "Do you miss it?" he asked after a moment. I looked at him, puzzled. Miss what? Being married. Being wanted. His voice was even, but his words dropped heavy into the space between us. I was not sure how to respond. That question had lived inside me for years, quietly haunting the way I looked at the mirror, the way I dressed, and the way I avoided romantic films. I missed being touched. I missed being looked at with a kind of longing that made me feel alive. But I had buried those feelings under layers of practicality and polite distance. I had not expected him to see them. "I think everyone misses being wanted," I said softly, turning back to the source. He did not speak right away. When I glanced at him, he was still watching me, not with judgment, but something deeper. Understanding. Empathy. "I see you." "You know," he said. I froze. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I see how much you give, how hard you try, and I see how lonely you are when you think no one is watching." His words were not meant to unsettle me, but they did. They pierced through the quiet armor I had built around myself. I tried to laugh it off, but it came out too thin, too forced. "You are being dramatic, Ryan." "Maybe," he said with a small smile. "But I mean it." I turned to face him fully. "Why now? Why say this now?" He shrugged, stepping just a little closer. "Maybe because you looked beautiful tonight. Maybe because I could not hold it in any longer. Or maybe because I have spent 2 years pretending I only see you as my stepmother when the truth is you are so much more than that." My breath caught. Ryan, we cannot have this conversation. Why not? Because it is inappropriate. Because I helped raise you. Because it crosses every line there is. I am not a boy, he said firmly. And you are not just someone who cooked my meals. We both know we have been dancing around something for a long time. I backed up slightly, needing space to think. This is wrong. You know that. I know it is complicated, but wrong. I do not know. Tell me you have not felt it too. Tell me you have not noticed how it feels when we are alone together. I did not answer right away. The truth was I had felt it. I had pushed it away every time it rose in me, terrified of what it meant. I was older. I had been broken. I was supposed to be the responsible one. But none of those things stopped the way I noticed how his voice deepened when he spoke to me, or how I felt a strange flutter when he brushed past me in the hallway. Ryan stepped closer. Close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin. You deserve to feel wanted again. I do not know what you are trying to do, I whispered, my voice unsteady. I am not trying to do anything. I am just saying what you will not. I turned away from him, trying to focus on the pasta, the scent, the simple act of dinner. But my hands trembled and my heart raced. Everything I had locked away behind years of caution came crashing forward. I could feel his presence just behind me, not touching, but so close that my body was aware of every breath he took. I made a mistake saying anything, he said after a long pause. But I could not keep pretending. Not after the way you looked at me last week. Not after you sat beside me on the couch and leaned your head on my shoulder. It meant something. Maybe not to you, but it meant something to me. I turned slowly, searching his face for cruelty, for manipulation, for anything that would make this easier to dismiss. But there was only sincerity. Raw, open, unguarded sincerity. I do not know what I am doing, I said. Neither do I, but maybe that is all right. The oven beeped, reminding me the garlic bread was ready. I turned it off, but did not move to open it. He stepped forward, hesitating just before he reached for my hand. I would never push you, he said. But if you ask me to stay away, I will. Just tell me the truth. Did you feel something, too? I looked down at our hands, so close but not touching. I remembered every quiet night we had spent talking, every joke that made me laugh too long, every unspoken moment that felt like something waiting to become real. And in that stillness, I realized I had felt it, too. The kitchen filled with the rich scent of rosemary and garlic as I stirred the sauce, trying to steady my breathing. My mind had not stopped racing since he asked me that question. I had laughed at first nervously, lightly, hoping he had been joking. But the way he looked at me, the way his voice trembled, and his eyes searched mine, it was anything but a joke. He had not meant it in the way a boy makes a careless mistake. He meant it with intention, with vulnerability, with a weight that seemed to come from years of silent watching and wondering. I turned off the stove. The spoon clattered against the edge of the pot as I laid it down, suddenly aware of how loud even the smallest sound felt in the air between us. He stood in the doorway, his tall frame casting a faint shadow across the counter. His posture was hesitant, hands buried in the pockets of his hoodie, like he was trying to hide the very emotions that brought him to me. He looked older than usual. Or maybe I was just seeing him differently now. Seeing everything differently now. Are you angry? He asked. That question tore through me more than the first. Was I angry? I should have been. I should have told him to forget it, to walk away, to never bring it up again. But instead, all I felt was this strange, unfamiliar ache in my chest. A slow pull of connection I had never thought to feel. Not with him. Not like this. But there it was. I walked past him, needing air, needing space, but he followed me like a quiet shadow. We ended up in the living room, the only light coming from the soft lamp in the corner. I sank into the couch and he sat beside me, not touching, not speaking, just breathing the same air. Both of us unsure of what this was, what it could become. "You have always been kind to me," he said softly, more than anyone. "You saw me when I felt invisible. And I think somewhere in that I started seeing you differently too." I looked at him, really looked at him. The boy I had helped raise after his father left. The boy who used to leave his toys in every room, who cried the first time he got his heart broken. Who asked me how to tie a tie. But this was no longer that boy. This was a man. A young man, yes, but still a man who had grown quietly and deeply under the same roof as me, developing feelings he did not know how to name until now. I reached out, touching his hand, not as a signal, not as an answer, but as acknowledgement. His fingers curled slightly against mine, almost shyly. There was nothing rushed about this. It was not lust. It was not rebellion. It was a hunger for understanding, for affection, for permission to feel safe in someone else's presence. "I do not know what this is," I whispered, "but I know it is real." His eyes met mine. The distance between us shortened, not physically, but emotionally. He moved closer, cautiously, as if giving me the chance to stop it, to stop him. But I did not move. I did not breathe. I only waited. And when his hand gently brushed a strand of hair from my face, I felt something I had not felt in years, wanted, seen, cherished. He leaned in slowly, asking with every inch if this was still allowed. And when our lips finally met, it was not fireworks. It was silence. A soft, reverent silence that made the world disappear. There was no guilt in it, no shame, only surrender. We broke apart, eyes wide and uncertain. But neither of us pulled away. His hand fanned my cheek, his thumb brushing against the skin with quiet tenderness. "Do you regret this already?" he asked. "No," I replied honestly. "I regret everything I ignored until now. Every time I told myself I was just imagining it, the connection, the way you looked at me. I buried it because I thought it was wrong. But now I do not know." He pressed his forehead to mine. "You made me feel like I mattered," he said. "You still do." We sat like that, two people hovering between what should not be and what already was. The sound of the ticking clock returned, grinding us in a moment that felt both impossible and inevitable. Later, as we sat in the dark, his head resting gently on my shoulder, he whispered, "I never asked expecting an answer. I just needed you to know." And I realized something then. I had not given him an answer. I had given him a truth. One neither of us was ready to speak aloud, but one we had both felt in every glance, every quiet dinner, every late-night conversation that had lasted longer than it should have. This was not just a reaction to loneliness. It was not born out of grief or need. It was something different, something tender. It had grown silently over time, unnoticed until it could no longer be hidden. "I am afraid of what comes next," I confessed, barely audible. "So am I," he said. "But I would rather be afraid with you than alone." The simplicity of that statement undid me. Because despite all the rules, all the boundaries we had both sworn to honor, here we were together in stillness, neither pushing nor pulling, just existing in a shared truth. What followed that night was not reckless. It was slow, deliberate, emotionally rich. every moment laced with caution and care. His hands were respectful, trembling even. Mine were unsure, searching. We spoke little, but our silences were thick with meaning. It was not perfect, but it was real. It was raw. When it ended, we stayed there, tangled in warmth and emotion. No promises were made. No labels were given, only an unspoken agreement to not deny what we both felt. Outside, the world continued on as though nothing had changed. But everything had. The next morning, the light pouring in through the curtains felt too honest, too revealing. I lay still in bed, listening to the distant sound of him moving around the house. Every creak of the floorboard sent a wave of uncertainty through me. What had happened between us was not casual. It could never be. But now, in the quiet aftermath, the reality of it was settling in like dust on furniture long untouched. I could not go back to who I was yesterday, nor could I pretend that nothing had shifted. It had irrevocably. My heart beat slower, heavier, each thump laced with guilt and longing. I got up slowly, wrapping my robe around me, shielding myself from a house that suddenly felt unfamiliar. In the kitchen, he was pouring coffee, his back to me, shirt rumpled, hair slightly disheveled. Just yesterday, I might have walked past him without a second thought. But now, even the sound of his breathing seemed personal. He turned, meeting my gaze, and something in his eyes, a mixture of hope and hesitation, undid me all over again. "Morning," he said softly, as if testing the temperature of the air between us. "Morning," I replied, my voice more fragile than I intended. We sat in silence, each of us pretending to sip our coffee, our hands trembling slightly.